Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
I'm Steve Orme, the Midlands editor of the British Theatre Guide. Filament Theatre is a London-based company whose latest show is the intriguingly titled Rufus Longbottom and the Space Rabbit. It was developed with hundreds of schoolchildren who came up with their own ideas, and many of them are included in the show. It had its premiere at Derby Theatre, where one of the cast, Lula Mebrahtu, and co-founder Osnat Schmool explained the background to the story.
The show started out as a project in schools where Sabina, the director, and myself went and worked with probably nearly 600 children in about 20 different workshops on story making, character making, music making, all from the sort of perspective of how you would make a theatre show, to get their ideas about characters. And then we gathered all their fantastic and very imaginative story and character ideas and did some research and development with a company of actors and a designer and a lighting designer to think about how we would take the absolute gems and weave them together, weave the stories together, find out how these characters' paths could cross. So that was R&D 1, and then R&D 2 we'd done some more writing, tried a few more ideas out, shared them with some children so they could give us their feedback, and then we took it all into a rehearsal room to make the show. So actually, although it's written by Sabina and myself and the company, the little nuggets, the gems, which are the starting points for all of these journeys and these stories, are very much from the children, many of whom will be in audiences over the next 3 weeks, which is really exciting. They get to see where their imagination can be taken to, you know, how that can develop into an actual real life musical show.
So have you ever adopted that particular method before?
Actually, no, not for making our own work. Predominantly, Filament's work is made from ideas that Sabina and I have and a devising process. And you know, we take an idea, I write music, we workshop it, we test things out, and then we refine it. And this is our second piece of work that we've made for children. The first time we made a children's show, it was an adaptation of a novel called Momo, written by Michael Ende, who wrote Never-Ending Story. So actually it was a really dense and long children's story that we had to whittle down. And in fact, it was in many ways it was the antidote to writing a show where we had to refine someone's ideas and distill them. And this was where we had sort of gems of ideas, and we got to play and expand, which actually is more truthful to the way I write. As a lyricist and a composer, I'll get one, you know, very small human idea. For example, one of our first shows looked at commuters in London, and I was always very taken by how angry people would be on their way to work, and there was one tiny little idea that actually we in a you know, a musical sense, almost like an operatic sense, you get to just play with that and expand it and see how far you can take it. And there's a parallel with that and the way we've taken the gems from these young people's minds in a way and said, this is great. It was just one child who thought up a rabbit who crash landed from outer space, and some children find the rabbit and they look after her, and that was the end of that story. But actually, I was so taken by it. It was you know, there's actually at the time, especially even more so than now, the news was so full of stories of refugees and about young children being scared and alone and needing people to really look after them. And these children had hit on it, that as an idea that actually what you do is you look after people. And there's a lesson to the grown-ups, right? And I was so happy in a way. I was like, I couldn't have wished for a better offering. But it was as simple as that. So we then took that idea of the space rabbit and found her a way to get her path intertwined with some other characters from other children from other schools, like Rufus Longbottom, comes from a school in Belper. Eva Ross is the name of the child who invented Rufus Longbottom. I have strange recall for some of these names. And it was so heartwarming. I just think it's really, you know, of course we make a light-hearted show that's entertaining and fun for children, but actually the underlying messages that come from them they're a word to the wise. Yeah, this is what we should do. This is a moral obligation that children see really clearly. And when someone's really upset, or when someone's in danger or in trouble and needs you to be their family, that's what you do. You make their family. You make it around them, and you make them safe and whole. And what you get in return is immeasurable, right? Yeah.
Didn't one of the schools, the kids wrote a letter to the MP or something asking him to
save space rabbits.
To let space rabbits stay in the planet.
The schools, a lot of them really ran with it as literacy work in classroom and how they could develop that, and they had to write letters, and that was it. Space rabbit. There was some newspaper articles about a space rabbit being in jail because it had been found on planet Earth, and the kids were writing letters to set the space rabbit free. Right, yeah, good. Well, there is hope for the future.
Yes.
Thank you, children.
Were there times when you thought this project might never actually come to the stage because it's taken a fair while to bring together, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and I think, ultimately, it's never because there isn't a will. It's because in order to get something of this quality and with this many people in the team accessible to schools' audiences, to young families' audiences, ultimately we have to raise a lion's share of the funding. It's not a commercial enterprise where you make the money back off tickets. Not quite yet. It'd be great if it would be one, that would be a future plan for the project. But actually the real point of it is to get those children to see it. And we took a long time to raise the money, lots of applications to various funding bodies to help us see it through so that you can do it properly, look after your professional team respectfully, and that takes a lot of work. Our producer Cara and our director worked absolutely tirelessly to make sure that the funds were there to help this happen, because that is really, it's really important that you respect your artists. That's the same argument as why you wouldn't ask a plumber to work for nothing, so you don't ask artists to work for nothing either, because wow, they work hard and you see what you get in return. A very happy audience for our children who were giving advice. I had a lot of advice in the audience today to Rufus and to Rabbit on how they should proceed. The story could have taken some serious changes if we'd listened to them. But yeah, I think that's why it's taken long in some ways, and also just the sheer amount of work that goes into organising a project with this many different strands of making sure that we honour the work that's come from the children and make sure that we have some kind of writing development process that allows it to get to the right place before you put it on stage. And yeah, there's always an argument for it needs more time and more work, and that will come, and the audience is part of the conversation now, which is a crucial thing, that you'll know better now how certain things work once the audience lets you know, and they will really let you know. So we'll continue to polish and reimagine forever, I'm sure. That's the artist's way. Never satisfied, but really delighted. We couldn't have asked for a better team and fantastic company to work with, really.
Lula, you're playing the Space Rabbit, so what challenges does that present to you?
Well, Lula's not just the Space Rabbit. We should also say that Lula is also the sound designer, and that means that her brain is used to the max, right?
As the sound designer, I had to make sure that all the technical aspects of what makes Space Rabbit from outer space and making decisions on how does she acquire language and when and why and what are the technical requirements of that. And then when being Space Rabbit, to no longer be of a tech like the Lula sound designer person, but to actually embody that as the rabbit, because it's not a piece of hardware she's wearing, is part of her being, like it's her hands. And so as an actor, I guess it's not just what you use on your mouth. I have to always remember, my hands make sound. Rabbit knows that. So she's astute to it and she will embody it. And so that's been the work.
And ultimately, it makes it incredibly magical to watch. Once you as an audience, I think, realise that the rabbit's paws, her paws from outer space, have this quality that will absorb sound, learn language, and then change it and throw it back. It's so entertaining as well. You know, the kids, there's a moment where Rabbit's learning how to say Rufus Longbottom's name, and in some ways it's as basic as any funny sound. When someone says something really quickly, it sounds funny to us. When you manipulate the sound, as Lula can do with technology and with the interface between her gloves and music software, actually it goes somewhere where the human voice can't go. So it is then alien and extraordinary and quite funny as well. And there's a little, you know, an old gentleman in a wheelchair in his pyjamas looking at a space rabbit. I can't really, I couldn't imagine anything more entertaining right now. So it's, you know, it's a fantastic marriage of all those ideas. But actually, I think Lula has been meticulous throughout the process that it's not an add-on. We've got a special effect, we can use it. No. It's actually intellectually been thought through, so that there's a logic from a character perspective why this happens and why this works. It was always
a conversation as to when are we applying technology and when are we not. Not for the novelty of, look, we have something cool, I have this cool pair of gloves and I can do cool things. Like, I could have triggered many things in the space and done a lot of things, but it didn't serve the story. And it didn't serve my character. And so using because outside of this I'm a musician, so I use it in a different context, but within the context of theatre, everything has to be justified and validated, and so you have to go beyond the technology, actually, just serve the story, and the technology should serve that. And so that was always a conversation between us as to, like, well, even just discussing, did she record those animal sounds because they scared her? And it was just like, no, she just recorded some stuff that affected her. And so it wasn't a good emotion, a bad emotion when she was just learning new things. When you heard the elephant horn, like you would be, she jumped and she captured that sound. And so in the Battle of the Wolves, even just trying to map out how she'd fight a wolf with her little, although she's a big rabbit, they're wolves. You know, it's just like she can only use the tools that she has based on what she's experienced. So that was interesting. But yeah, so they were some of the challenges, but just not, as an actor, not to trigger an elephant sound when you're talking to Rufus.
Yes, that would have been shocking.
Yes, a rabbit didn't want to scare Rufus. So, yeah.
So is this the type of thing that you normally do, or do you go for a different kind of theatre?
I've been working with Filament for like, how many years now? It's been a minute.
4.
It's been, yeah.
4, 3, 4? Something
since I met you. So Osnat used to teach me, and since I discovered her approach to creating work, which is always born from playing, and then she takes seed ideas and develops it into something structured. That approach to creating anything is where I live instinctively, even as a musician, in theatre or anything. And so whilst I thought I never wanted to do a musical, in truth, even though I was studying a musical theatre course. My aspirations was not to be in a musical. And I kind of don't believe that's what we do. I kind of just believe we tell stories, and music plays a part when words is not sufficient enough. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's what all musical theatre thinks is doing, I suppose. But I find that more true in the way, just I suppose in the way that Filament work. And so this is the first time I've used technology in this context in theatre. I was doing it within my own project, like I was doing pop-up shows of exploring how to use the tech within theatre. And so it's nice to take it out of my little world and apply it with other actors, and, you know, developing an idea with a community of people who have knowledge in other parts, so I can focus on what I'm good at. So this is the debut of like a proper production of working in this way, but it definitely isn't the last.
I don't think I've seen this kind of technology, this sound technology, used in this way, especially not in children's theatre. You know, we're very much of a mind that young people, old people, any age, they deserve the quality of work that we like to make. You know, and it shouldn't be made simple or too easily accessible just because you're young. They've got complex, engaged minds. You just make it good. Yeah. You make it good, and then they'll be with you. And actually, I'd rather strive for that. Say it's like you say, it's difficult and it takes a long time to get together, but is worth it for them.
But the process is very much part of it, because in the R&Ds, for example, it was this idea of how a rabbit acquired language before we started recording animal sounds and other characters, and those scenes were developed. It was the children, we passed the mic round to the children and asked them, what do you want rabbit, what's the first word you want rabbit to learn, for example, and they said welcome, and I recorded that in real time and played around with it and gave it back to them, and someone else taught me something else. So that as a process was phenomenal, and even for me as an actor and for them as an audience, but it's not even an audience-actor relationship anymore. You were very much part of the piece. So yeah, I don't even know if that was a question, but I just remember that really that had an impact. So the gloves are not being used in this context until now, and I'm happy we're one of the early ones to do this.
Yeah, me too.
And what was going through your mind at the end of that first performance?
Whoa. The sound designer of me was like, everything worked. Yeah. I remember I didn't trigger elephant in when I was sleeping.
There were no unexplained elephants, definitely. No, actually, technically, it's much more complicated than the company make it look.
Yeah.
I would say they're doing a lot of things like elegant swans, where we're really just looking at their lovely long necks, and their feet are going for it, because I see what there is so much technically going on. So the fact that it was as smooth as it was and still super entertaining, that everyone will know what they want to improve on. That is the nature of theatre. Yeah. You don't just do it once, you do it again and again and again. So every time you come back on stage, you've got another opportunity to find something new, to fix something that you weren't happy with before. But actually, for a first performance, it was really, really impressive about how technically smooth it was, given the constraints of time and all that. I'm really indebted and proud to all the team, everybody who's worked so hard together to bring it here. Really, really happy it's had its premiere in Derby.
I'm excited that we have more shows, because can just continue to enjoy it now. We understand everything works, and we knew it worked, but you never know what happens on the day it has to go on.
Yeah.
And so now I think that's what it is for me now. I can stop celebrating that everything works smoothly and I know what I'm doing. I just what Space Rabbit does: land on Earth, meet a bunch of people, do some cool things, and then try and search for our family again.
You're a London-based company. First performance was in Derby. Why was that?
Well, Derby was one of the venues that first partnered us in the project on doing outreach and working with schools. So they were some of the first workshops we did with young people were for schools via Derby. So it was really important for us that they were, top of that list in a way. It's the first time we've actually produced work outside of London. So it's really great. I'm really thrilled that we didn't start in London. Well, that's the only place things happen, because we all know it's not. And here we are. So yeah, I think that's probably why. They've been part of the journey. So it's super important that it was one of we're doing a couple of venues that didn't actually come through that process. They booked an exciting show called Rufus Longbottom and the Space Rabbit. They're intrigued by the story, and I think it's still perfectly easy to follow and accessible to people who haven't been part of the writing process. But actually it seemed really fitting that we should be here where some of the journey really began. Yeah.
And what's next for Filament after this tour?
After this tour, we have a piece of work coming to an opera festival in London called Earth Makes No Sound, which is very different in its nature to this. It still works very much with close harmony singing, physical theatre making, and it's not really a piece of work specifically aimed at children, but it's more like a piece of gig theatre. So it's normally with about 30 or 40 singers. It's really kind of voice heavy and very light on everything else. So actually give Lula a chance to be free of any technological thinking and just be focused on singing and moving. It's very much about the damage that we do to the planet. It's about caring for this earth that we have. and it sort of looks at various aspects of elements. So there's a whole section about the sea, and that we're working with a London-based youth choir called the Roundhouse Choir on developing a new episode about plastic pollution, which sounds like a really heavy thing to make a performance out of, but they're really kind of exciting and inventive young people who will, in a not dissimilar way to the young people in Derby who gave us character ideas that ended up in Rufus Longbottom. The young people in the Roundhouse Choir will be giving us their thoughts about plastic pollution, think Blue Planet and all those things that are really in our minds at the moment. And it's kind of a bit of a warning piece for Sabina and I. We got, I had this real urge to write about the climate and the weather is something we have no control over. So how powerful is it if it's all made vocal and all made physical? So there's elements of fire and wind. I can't go to that gag. And that's Tête à Tête Opera Festival is in August. On August the 18th, we'll be at the Place Theatre in London, where that piece will be presented with Filament Chorus and the Roundhouse Choir. Very different to this, but actually still, like I say, it's working very much on how we make theatre out of harmony singing, and that quality remains the same, and devising, that quality remains the same. And then, I really enjoy that work. I really enjoy the response we get to it, and then I'm really hoping that we'll be able to then remake Rufus, give him another outing, give the Space Rabbit another flight sometime next year, so that we can bring it to some more audiences. This will be, but this is like a really special place to put all this work in and to be here to launch it. And really, it's quite an exciting moment to feel like this is the beginning of the new chapter, the new adventure for it. So something's in the air.
The current tour of Rufus Longbottom and the Space Rabbit continues until the 9th of June.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.